Theaetetus. That is certainly the best and wisest state of mind. Stranger, for all these reasons, Theaetetus, we must admit that refutation is the greatest and chiefest of purifications, and he who has not been refuted, though he be the great king himself, is in an awful state of impurity. He is uninstructed and deformed in those things in which he who would be truly blessed ought to be fairest and purest. Theaetetus, very true, stranger. And who are the ministers of this art? I'm afraid to say the Sophist, Theaetetus. Why, stranger? Lest we should assign to them too high a prerogative, Theaetetus. Yet the Sophist has a certain likeness to our minister of purification, stranger. Yes, the same sort of likeness which a wolf, who is the fiercest of animals, has to a dog, who is the gentlest. But he who would not be found tripping ought to be very careful in this matter of comparison, for they are most slippery things. Nevertheless, let us assume that the Sophists are the men. I say this provisionally, for I think that the line which divides them will be marked enough if proper care is taken. Theaetetus, likely enough, stranger. Let us grant then that from the discerning art comes purification, and from purification let there be separated off a part which is concerned with the soul. Of this mental purification instruction is a portion, and of instruction education, and of education that refutation of vain conceits which has been discovered in the present argument. And let this be called by you and me the nobly descended art of sophistry. Theaetetus. Very well, and yet considering the number of forms in which he has presented himself, I begin to doubt how I can with any truth or confidence describe the real nature of the Sophist. Stranger, you naturally feel perplexed, and yet I think that he must be still more perplexed in his attempt to escape us. For as the proverb says, when every way is blocked, there is no escape. Now then is the time of all others to set upon him. Theaetetus, true, stranger. First let us wait a moment and recover breath, and while we are resting, we may reckon up in how many forms he has appeared. In the first place, he was discovered to be a paid hunter after wealth and youth. Theaetetus, yes. In the second place, he was a merchant in the goods of the soul. Theaetetus, certainly. Stranger, in the third place, he was turned out to be a retailer of the same sort of wares. Theaetetus, yes. And in the fourth place, he himself manufactured the learnt wares which he sold. Stranger, quite right. I will try and remember the fifth myself. He belonged to the fighting class and was further distinguished as a hero of debate who professed the eristic art. Theaetetus, true. Stranger, the sixth point was doubtful, and yet we at last agreed that he was a purger of souls, who cleared away notions obstructive to knowledge. Theaetetus, very true. Stranger, do you see that when the professor of any arts has one name and many kinds of knowledge, there must be something wrong? The multiplicity of names which is applied to him shows that the common principle to which all these branches of knowledge are tending is not understood. Okay, so I want to jump back up to where the stranger says, for all these reasons, Theaetetus, we must admit that refutation is the greatest and chiefest of purifications, and he who has not been refuted, though he be the great king himself, is in an awful state of impurity. He is uninstructed and deformed in those things in which he who would be truly blessed ought to be fairest and purest. Yeah, here we see like if you know if you ever read Hegel, you see a little bit of like a Hegelian kind of method being used here, um, which is a little bit different from the Socratic method in that it's not so much about asking questions as much as it's about finding trying to find things that are wrong with your thinking or with your theory about refutation. So not only Hegelian but a little bit uh, scientific in as far as the method is concerned, where this experiments are supposed to be set up in such a way where it could be duplicated, so it could be experiment has to be able to be refuted. So when it's being duplicated, individuals could confirm that what somebody else found was if they could find the same things that other people find, to kind of confirm that what they found did actually occur or is somehow a part of nature. The experiment has to be set up in a way that it could be refuted, because of course if it couldn't be refuted, there would be no way of proving it true true or false. Right. And then the other interesting thing about this part would be the notion of purification. It's interesting that in order to purify your thoughts or your ideas, or your behavior, I mean, it's your knowledge. I suppose your soul is what they use here. Is to introduce the notion of refutation. So it's almost as if you have to almost attempt to taint your soul in order to purify it. You have to have the you have to have your idea, your soul kind of engage with the opposite, or with what counters your thoughts, and kind of engage in somewhat of a struggle, and see if you come out on top, just to be able to confirm that you have a pure soul. So I mean, I suppose it's somewhat interesting in that regard. We also want to jump to the part where the stranger kind of recaps on what the Sophist is, and yeah, it's quite interesting. Let's see if we could find it here. So I mean, so first the stranger starts off with the Sophist as a paid hunter for wealth and youth, which already sets up the goal of someone not of an individual not searching for knowledge for the sake of knowledge, or knowledge for the love of knowledge, or for curiosity, or anything of that sort, but for status, and for wealth. So yeah, I mean, Plato doesn't explicitly Well, he kind of does say in the sense that that's not really that's not really noble. Um, and of course, it would definitely not be noble in when related to the other aspects of the Sophist, where he says here, the Sophist is the second thing they discovered was that the Sophist was a merchant in the goods of the soul, which I would assume that was the Sophist kind of traveling around and gaining knowledge from individuals who either had knowledge, like actual knowledge, or who had something that resembled knowledge, was at least good enough to pass for knowledge. And that was the second thing they discovered. And then the third thing was, they said the Sophist turned out to be a retailer of the same sort of wares, which I assume is kind of an extension of or what they discovered in the what they call what the second thing they discovered. So it's as going from a merchant to a retailer. I'm not too familiar with the distinctions between the terms. I'm sure there is a very good distinction. What it seems to me would be a merchant is more of a trader, a traveler who kind of exchanges things, whereas a retailer is more of someone who isn't much of a traveler, is more of an individual that sets up shop in a particular place and tries to sell what they have, isn't really into the traveling around and somewhat of trading with individuals. Yeah, so that moves us to the third thing they found was that the Sophist manufactured what he sold. So I mean, that conflicts with the second thing that they discovered, which was that the Sophist was a merchant. And so in one sense, we see the Sophist as an individual that travels around and seeks to obtain knowledge. And in another sense, we see the Sophist as an individual that it manufactures their own knowledge. So it's as if they're saying that the Plato's trying to say this individual, the Sophist, creates the knowledge that they sell rather than trades obtains it from another individual by being a merchant. I would assume by trade, or through trade. And then the fifth thing was that Sophist was a fighter, and in the sense of the Sophist was a debater, was used rhetoric and was good at arguing, which of course seems to be, I mean, well, in the sense it conflicts with the goods of the soul. I mean, I suppose it. Well, I suppose the fighting class doesn't really conflict with being a merchant or a retailer of the goods of the soul, but it would be another aspect of the Sophists where, yeah, it didn't say that this is one of the things that the Sophist is selling. It's just saying this is another characteristic of the Sophists, as a as as a part of the definition of what makes the individual a sophist. And then the last thing they discovered was that sophist was a purger of the soul, who cleared away notions obstructive to knowledge. So the sophists taught, well, they would it seem would teach individuals how to learn, or how to think, or would remove any kind of erroneous information or knowledge from an individual, by whatever means they used. And yeah, this I mean, like the stranger says, it's kind of a bit much to define the sophist as. Saying the sophist having so many names isn't really well defined, but as an individual, these aren't really a lot. It's not as if one individual can't take on all these qualities. A single individual could definitely still do all these things, uh, and it wouldn't really be it wouldn't be anything unusual. So let's see. Let's see here. Theotetus. I should imagine this to be the case, stranger. At any rate, we will understand him, and no indolence shall prevent us. Let us begin again, then, and re-examine some of our statements concerning the sophist. There was one thing which appeared to me especially characteristic of him. Theotetus, to what are you referring? Stranger, we are saying of him, if I am not mistaken, that he was a disputer. Theotetus, we were. Stranger, and does he not also teach others the art of disputation? Theotetus, certainly he does. Stranger, and about what does he profess that he teaches men to dispute? To begin at the beginning, does he make them able to dispute about divine things which are invisible to men in general? Theotetus, at any rate, he is said to do so. Stranger, and what do you say the visible things in heaven and earth, and the like? Theotetus, certainly he disputes and teaches to dispute about them. Stranger, then again, in private conversation, when any universal assertion is made about generation and essence, we know that such persons are tremendous argufiers and are able to impart their own skill to others. Thesis, undoubtedly, stranger, and do they not profess to make men able to dispute about law and about politics in general? Thesis, why, no one would have anything to say to them if they did not make these professions. Stranger, in all and every art, what the craftsman ought to say in answer to any question is written down in a popular form, and he who likes may learn. Theotetus, I suppose that you are referring to the precepts of Protagoras about wrestling and other arts. Stranger, yes, my friend, and about a good many other things. In a word, is not the art of disputation a power of disputing about all things? Theotetus, certainly. There does not seem to be much which is left out. Stranger, but ho, my dear youth, do you suppose this possible? For perhaps your young eyes may see things which to our duller sight do not appear. Theotetus, to what are you alluding? I do not think that I understand your present question. Stranger, I ask whether anybody can understand all things. Theotetus, happy would mankind be if such a thing were possible. Socrates, but how can anyone who is ignorant dispute in a rational manner against him who knows? Theotetus, he cannot. Stranger, then why was the sophisticated sophistical art such a mysterious power? The thesis, to what do you refer, stranger? How do the sophists make young men believe in their supreme and universal wisdom? For if they neither disputed nor were thought to dispute rightly, or bring a thought to do so, were deemed no wiser for their controversial skill, then, to quote your own observation, no one would give them money or be willing to learn their art. The thesis, they certainly would not, stranger. But they are willing. The thesis, yes, they are, stranger. Yes, and the reason I should imagine is that they are supposed to have knowledge of those things about which they dispute. DT is certainly, stranger, and they dispute about all things. DT is true, stranger, and therefore to their disciples they appear to be all wise. DT is certainly, stranger, but they are not, for that was shown to be impossible. DT is impossible, of course. Stranger, then the sophist has been shown to have a sort of conjectural or apparent knowledge only of all things, which is not the truth. Thetis, exactly. No better description of him could be given. Yeah, so the issue I guess here is, though it is true nobody can know everything and have knowledge of all things, still philosophy is the in one sense or one definition could be the love of knowledge. And if it's the love of knowledge, one would assume it's the love of all knowledge. And though one can't have all knowledge, I mean, this is kind of the aspiration of philosophy, to seek all knowledge, or at least have some kind of respect for all knowledge. But certainly to believe that you have all knowledge when you don't, that's definitely against. It's not very. It's against truth. It's a falsehood. Certainly, would an individual that considered them, would individuals during that time have thoughts of those sorts where they thought they believed they knew everything, where they actually did not? I mean, it it shouldn't be difficult to think that you don't have all the knowledge of all things. But it's also, one would also have to question the thought processes of individuals of that time, and as far as, I guess, what they would even consider relevant knowledge. This is before. Socrates. It is before maybe philosophy as we know it now, or even as philosophy as Plato presented it, and spread it, even before him, Socrates. It wasn't the way it is now. So as far as people's thought processes and how complex or sophisticated they were in their way of thinking about the world, their relationship to the world, their meta thinking, what they think they know, what the kind of known knowns and then known unknowns, things of that sort. It was quite different at that time. Of course they didn't know as much as we know now, but to understand that you are quite profoundly ignorant, and as far as what all that can possibly be known during that time, I guess that would be the question.